Hello and welcome to Newsbreak at 7. I'm Veera Raghav. Our focus this Friday evening, the impact smartphones have on our children and how to deal with it in schools. While several Indian schools ban and try to restrict the use of smartphones on campuses, in fact, several schools around the globe are aware of the consequences of it. A UNESCO report has now reiterated that globally the excessive use of smartphones on campus is a serious concern. The report, which proposed a global ban on smartphones on school campuses, warns against excessive usage without regulation and argues that the ban will help counter cyberbullying, attention issues and classroom disruptions. In fact, even psychological issues are often tied by psychologists to smartphone and excessive screen time. While it's obvious that unrestricted access to devices is extremely harmful for children, perhaps even adults, their mental and psychological well-being and growth, the question is, what do we do about it? And if a ban is practically possible, also, is that alone a solution for this entire problem? Joining us this evening, educators, parents, people who observe this very closely. Nurain Fazal, founder and managing trustee of the Inventure Academy. Soumya Jagannath, co-founder and CPO of Wobble, a pioneer in the area of de-addiction from screen time. And also our friend Pankaj Mishra, journalist and co-founder of Factor Daily, astute observer of technology and society, a parent as well who's concerned about the impact smartphones and devices have on kids, not just his own, also others, like all of us here. My first question to you, Nurain, when I was sharing this with a school principal, the response that I got was often a forbidden fruit can become more attractive. So you ban it in school, but if there is a binge at home on the smartphone, it really doesn't make any difference. How do we go about this as educators, as parents, and how do we make our children more responsible in the usage of smartphones and perhaps ourselves more responsible in the use of devices?
I think that's great points and great questions that you've raised there. Personally, I think we all fear the real world a lot more than we need to. I think it's fair to say that most of us on this panel, if not all of us, grew up in a world where we didn't have landlines at home, leave alone smartphones in our hands. So I do think parents are over anxious to get their kids ready and equip them with devices. Sometimes it's just babysitting, it's convenient babysitting. That said, do I think we can ban the use of smart devices? Absolutely not. I've seen children do great things with technology. So for example, we've had students who have created a crowdsourcing app in order to test water quality in Bangalore. I've seen students do peer tutoring, figure out how to use Google Maps and our traffic data from our buses to figure out what's the best way to get somewhere. And I think with teenagers, the more you try to ban something, the more likely they're going to find ways around it. So you're far better off empowering them to use it in a more responsible way. And the way to do this is to have a code of conduct, a cyber policy at school, and an agreement even between parents and students. And I think it's helpful if groups of parents and students, particularly in a particular class, come together and have these kind of dialogues and discussions. Schools should do workshops on responsible uses. What are the pros? What are the cons? They should have a code of conduct in terms of how to enforce it. So for example, at school, we believe in something called restorative practice, where let's say a child has been the victim of cyberbullying. You don't just hear the victim side of it, but also the child who may have actually been responsible for it. And it's aimed at building better relationships and understanding of perspectives, particularly in a world where I think everybody sees it as right or wrong. I think it's very essential. And also at school, we allow progressive use. So for example, in primary school, we only use it for reading one period a week, and we use it for math, something called MindSpark, which I think a lot of schools use. When you come to middle school, you're allowed a Chromebook, which is, again, used in a very secure environment, just one day a week, and you use it purely for doing quick assessments and to do collaborative research on problem statements and projects. In senior school, students are allowed to bring in their own devices, but again, of course, you have guards at school, but used again for the same reason, right? To do research. And by doing this, they understand how to use these tools in a responsible way. And let's face it, we live in a very digital world. kids need to learn not just the
when
skills.
When we say that, Nurain, in terms of how children are going to be responsible in the use of schools, I think as the parent of a 17-year-old, I was told when I was speaking about to the child who doesn't use Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, said, are you responsible about the use of smartphones? I guess it starts with us, right, Pankaj? When COVID struck, we were the ones who made sure that children needed smartphones and devices because that's the way education goes about. So given that, how do we go about this? This is it's a sort of a conflict in every mind. You can't live without smartphones, you can't live without WhatsApp, but at the same time, they have enormous issues as far as dopamine and frontal cortex growth. Doctors keep pointing out to that. How do we go about this?
It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one because, so first of all, an outright ban doesn't make sense because of the age that we are living in. The second point I think we sometimes miss is also the social and cultural context, the frames. And that differs from country to country. We talk of digital divide, we talk of accessibility to education, learning, and so on. So I think we need to start looking at mobile phones and their place at the heart of learning. And where does it belong? And how can it be at the heart of learning, if at all? Restrictive usage is something that other countries have experimented with. For example, in learning spaces, they are not allowed. But then when it becomes a tool to kind of offer an interactive learning experience, then I think it is curated. But an outright ban doesn't make sense. I'm also, conscious of the fact that there is a dark digital underbelly that we start looking at as the mobile phone usage and everything else that comes along with it grows, and we are all aware of that. But it doesn't mean that there is an outright ban. I agree with the other speaker. We need some deeper debates. We need to involve the student communities and try and charter a responsible course for this. Just the way we are talking about a responsible AI, so a responsible phone usage in schools.
Right. So, responsible phone usage in school, but then how much can we monitor? Soumya, you deal a lot with de-addiction from screen time. What's really the way forward? Because, when we talk as adults about responsible schooling, but we're giving a device which has enormous potential, as Pankaj pointing out, AI as well, it's impossible to monitor the child at all times. Leave a small child, I'm talking of teenagers or preteens. How do we go about this, and what are the issues that you are noticing on society in general?
No, absolutely. So to begin with, I want to echo the exact same sentiments. As you said, banning is not really the solution. And as you said, forbidden fruit, kids will find a way to indulge some way or the other. But the important thing, as we've all said, is exercising moderation. And how do you do that? How do you actually allow a child, given the dopamine pathways and the addiction with screens? So what we're actually doing at Wobble, as parents, both me and my co-founder realized with our own kids that they were getting really addicted. And as parents, it was really concerning because you cannot deny the mental and the physical repercussions of screen time. So we started looking at audio. We've grown up with radio and the Walkman, and we've grown up with now streaming. And we realized that audio is actually a very great alternative to screens. So, in terms of even cutting screen time by half, it's the passive over binging of screens that's a problem, which is shown to kids get diagnosed with anxiety and depression. So for us, our mission is how do we cut that? And looking at audio, immersive audio content with interactive activities based on the content really creates a good alternative to screens because it's a holistic, educational and entertaining content that we're making. So that's the way we are looking at it as parents and as, people who researched about, what's the effect of screens on kids.
Right. So when you make that point, and I'm going to go back to Nurain, I know all three of us have argued about life without smartphones may not be possible. Kids need to be involved with it because that's what they're going to use as they go out of school, and we need to keep them ready for what's available. But is it possible, Nurain, then that at least at the primary school level, or at least until a particular age, we completely keep them away from it, given that there are medical consequences and psychological consequences that doctors say in terms of the brain growth as well as psychological growth of a child?
Absolutely. I would encourage parents and schools, for that matter, to delay the use of smart devices as much as possible. But because once you get onto it, it is highly addictive. And even as adults, we know that. I mean, just think about the number of times a day that you check your phone, check for messages, check for likes. So yeah, we really need to model it. I think one of the big challenges is parents don't actually recognize that their child has an issue until something big happens. Until a child does something like impersonate someone, or is either the subject of bullying or is actually the perpetrator. So a lot of times I think parents just believe that there is no issue. So my recommendation to parents is please do not. In fact, when I go to a restaurant and I see parents give their children a phone or an iPad, I actually walk up to them and say, hey, please don't do that. I actually resisted getting a phone for the restaurant.
And the top of Silicon Valley, the top of inventors, Pankaj, often keep devices away from their children, as we've read several times. It's us, the consumer, who gets completely addicted to this. So how do we then go about this? Right? You also made the point that you need the smartphone, right? So how do we go about this on a day-on-day basis? And what is going to be the emerging challenge, not today, I'm talking 6 months hence?
Look, this is part of our life and work and learning too. You can't wish it away. So I think just the way we are looking at this intersection of technology and society, just the way we are looking at AI and society at larger platforms, I think somehow we have ignored this. And there's a lot of black or white kind of debates going on, ban the phone or not do it. But I think because we all know the addiction from algorithms, we all know, and you rightly pointed out, a lot of tech czars and inventors, they are shunning phones when it comes to their own children, and they are now big advocates of when it comes to its usage. But I feel that if we look at it as what kind of digital citizens we are looking at when as they are growing up, we need to balance the learning and accessibility and issues of digital divide, and then look at how can we become more responsible digital citizens? How can we kind of talk about it with children? I think those are larger questions. You can't wish it away. Absolutely.
Right. We can't wish it away. Absolutely. My last word to you, Soumya. I've spoken to teenagers who turn around and tell me that they're perhaps smarter and understand it much better. Is this an adult concern? Should we allow them to decide on how much time it is? Like our generation grew up without any phones. Eventually, we are now dealing with perhaps smartphones and all kinds of non-smart devices. Should we leave it more to the children to decide?
I mean, it's very hard for children. Think about it. There is a lot of peer pressure, even at a young age. When you have a child, seeing another child listen to a show and watch a show, it's very difficult to keep your child away from it. And, as a parent, your own behavior, I mean, as, Anne said right now, giving our smartphone or giving our screen at a restaurant is a big, we're also kind of responsible to kind of enhance that behavior. So, I think at the end of the day, we have to look for good alternatives. We have to look at different ways of using technology. Looking at audio, for example, like what we're doing, is just ways in which we can get great content for kids in a way that doesn't use screens but uses their imagination, enhances their learning. So I think both parents and adults and kids are equally responsible in this.
Very important point that you make there on that. That's all we have time for on this conversation, but important points made by all three of you. I think the consensus is that the change starts with us. If you're going to tell school kids not to use smartphones, then they need to see you as role models, not abusing devices and smartphones that you have. And it's important to study the impacts of this. Thank you so much, Nurain, Pankaj, as well as Soumya, for sharing your thoughts on this. Well, the hazards of a smartphone that we are discussing today may well be minor in comparison with the consequences of artificial intelligence and the changes that are emerging in terms of technology. Nayanthara Singh reports on how top global artificial intelligence companies have come together to find a way out in terms of responsible usage. Let's listen in.
As calls to regulate artificial intelligence grow louder, four of the most influential tech giants in artificial intelligence, namely OpenAI, Microsoft, Google and Anthropic, have come together to form a safety group called Frontier Model Forum to oversee the safe development of future AI models that will be more advanced than anything available to the public right now. They've highlighted their own responsibility in making this fast emerging technology a safe space and want to include companies that are currently developing advanced AI. Now, what the group really aims to do is really bring the tech sector together to collectively take responsibility for the safe use of AI. And the biggest part of that is ensuring that highly intelligent software remains under our control, under human control, and doesn't develop a mind of its own. To do that, they will promote research in AI safety, develop standards for evaluating future models, work closely with policymakers and other experts to discuss safety risks, and most importantly, work on harnessing AI for the power of the greater good for society, like combating climate change or detecting cancer. All of this is really coming very close on the heels of many state and global bodies who are now getting very seriously involved in legally regulating AI. Now, for example, last week, Joe Biden met with 7 major tech giants, including the creators of the Frontier Model Forum, where he got them to actually commit to several AI safeguards. The UK government as well is planning on convening a global summit on AI safety later this year, and the European Union is gearing up to introduce an AI Act, which will be the first comprehensive law that will govern how AI is used in the world. But the bigger question really is, how is the government planning on making tech giants agree to regulate a technology that is growing at unimaginable rates every day? Well, part of the tech giants' deal with the US government includes letting independent experts test models to detect out-of-control behavior on the part of the software, investing in cybersecurity, letting third parties come in and find security flaws, flagging inappropriate uses of AI, sharing key data, sharing important data with the government, and watermarking AI content, which will really help the public know the difference between what is real and what is AI generated. Nayanthara Singh for NDTV.